The first blow knocked Tommy down faster than any of us expected. One moment, my 73-year-old friend was holding the stick. The next, he was sprawled on the bar's sticky floor, blood pooling from his split lip. This is how we treat dinosaurs who don't know when to shut their mouths. The biker with tattoos on his knuckles laughed. Hate on his right hand, tire on his left. A huge motherfucker, a leather vest squeezing his beer belly, a Confederate flag patch on his sleeve. Tommy spat out blood, his arthritic hands struggling to grip the ground. Korean War veteran, 2 purple, hearts, reduced to crawling at the boots of a bar thug. I grabbed my cell phone, fingers shaking with a mix of anger and Parkinson's. The screen was blurry through my cataracts, but I didn't need to see clearly to send the message I drafted hours earlier when the bikers started to riot. That's BARF. Code, return home. The reply came back quickly. Cavalry on the way. 20 minutes. Hold your position. I slipped my phone into my pocket and looked across the table at Frankie Bill. Our silent consensus was clear. 20 minutes was an eternity in a bar fight, but we'd faced worse odds in Vietnam. We would endure. My son, I knuckled, my voice firmer than my hands. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Veterans of foreign wars. Post 713. It had been our sanctuary for decades. Every Thursday at 7 p.m. sharp, 5 old soldiers would gather at the corner table to drink cheap beer and share expensive memories. Me, Tommy, Frank, Bill, and Pitt, what remained of a once larger circle, diminished by time and illness. We weren't the only veterans who used the place. Scattered around the bar were men and women from more recent conflicts, the Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan, but Thursday nights belonged to us, the last of the Vietnam generation in our town. This night had started like any other. Tommy complaining about his new heart medication, Frank showing off pictures of his newest great-grandson, Bill savoring a single beer to last him the night. The fixed income was no longer enough for second rounds. Pitt hadn't shown up, 3rd week in a row. The hospice had strict schedules, and visiting hours ended at 5 p.m. The bikers arrived around 8 p.m., half a dozen guys in leather vests sporting Iron Reaper's MC patches. They weren't from around here. They were passing through looking for fun in a town with limited options. They'd been loud but tolerable until they saw Tommy's Vietnam vet cap. "Hey, Ruo!" Knuckles yelled from across the room. "Your cap says Vietnam. Are you one of those baby killers or just a darker rear cat who cleaned Ibarber out of the latrines?" The bar fell silent. Tommy, who had survived 2 tours of duty and returned home with shrapnel still embedded in his back, slowly turned in his seat. "My son, I'd suggest you enjoy your drink and leave the past where it belongs. Sounds to me like you were one of the rear guys." Knuckles smirked at his buddies. True warriors don't mind talking about their deaths. I put a reassuring hand on Tommy's arm. His blood pressure was already a medical concern, and a confrontation wouldn't help. "Leave it," I muttered. "It's not worth it." But Knuckles wasn't finished. He swayed over, beer in hand, towering over our table. "You old guys look like you're past your expiration date. Why don't you two leave and let the real men use this table?" Frank, the diplomat of our group, tried next. "There are plenty of tables available, mate. We'll be done soon." "I'm not your friend, man," Knuckles growled, then deliberately spilled beer on Frank's photographs. "Oops, looks like your brat's pictures got wet." That's when Tommy stood up. 5'7", elderly defiance facing 5'8", tattooed aggression. "You need to go?" Tommy said quietly. Now the blow came without warning. Knuckle moved quickly for a big guy, his fist connecting with Tommy's jaw, sending his glasses flying. And that's how we found ourselves at a standoff. Tommy bleeding on the floor, 5 other bikers moving to surround our table, and the rest of the bar patrons suddenly finding reasons to look away. The young bartender was already reaching for the phone, but who would he call? The local police were 20 minutes away from anywhere, and we didn't have 20 minutes. What we did have were our own backups. You have no idea what's coming your way, Bill said calmly, speaking for the first time that night. The quietest of our group had served as a sniper. 3 tours. His confirmed kills were still a number he'd never shared, not even with us. Knuckle laughed. What's next? Heart attacks, ambulances, bedtime. I helped Tommy sit up, pressing a napkin to his bleeding lip. Frank, how's your grandson? At Fort Benning? Frank cleaned his soggy photographs in a conversational voice. He finished Ranger School last month. They shipped him to the base 30 kilometers north along with about 50 of his closest friends. Oh, yeah, I turned to Bill. And your granddaughter? Is she still flying those helicopters? Bill smiled slightly. They made her captain last year. She's very protective of her grandfather. The bikers exchanged glances, sensing something beneath the casual conversation. What the fuck are you talking about, veggies? Knuckles demanded. Just catching up, I said, checking my watch. Funny thing about veterans, we're never really alone. Are you threatening me? Knuckles leaned in, his breath reeking of whiskey and bad decisions. Not at all, I replied. I'm just suggesting you might want to finish your drinks and get moving before the bar's front door swung open with military precision. 5 soldiers in army fatigues stalked in unhurriedly, but purposefully. Fit young men radiating controlled tension. Their eyes scanned the room with professional efficiency before settling on our table. Grandpa, the tallest one called out. You, okay? Frank waved. Over here, Jake. We have a little situation. Jake crossed the bar accompanied by 2 male and 2 female soldiers. There were no weapons visible, but they moved with the absolute confidence of trained combatants. Is this it? Jake asked, stopping in front of Knuckles. At 6'1", Ranger qualified and combat tested, Jake dwarfed the motorcyclist despite their similar builds. This gentleman, Frank said gently. He thought it appropriate to assault Tommy and destroy family photographs. Jake's expression didn't change, but something cold entered his eyes. Ah, yes, Knuckles, you have to admit it. He didn't back down immediately. Bar fight, none of your business, soldier. Look, that's where you're wrong, Jake replied. Tommy served with my grandfather in the Mekong Delta. Saved his life twice. He nodded at me. Jack was best friends with my grandmother's brother, Bill. Taught me how to shoot when I was 12. His gaze hardened. So this is very much my business. The bar door opened again. More uniforms. 10, then 15, then 20 men and women, different patches and insignia, filtered in silently. What the hell? Is this? One of the other bikers demanded. A woman wearing captain's stripes stepped forward, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Perfect posture. I'm Captain Wilson, Bill's granddaughter. I got a message there was trouble, just a few calls, I explained. News travels fast among military families. The bar had transformed in minutes. Where there had been indifferent civilians averting their eyes from the conflict, there was now a wall of uniforms. Army, Marines, Air Force, Navy, young faces with old eyes, veterans of recent wars standing in silent solidarity with veterans, of older ones. No one called the strip, Knuckles said, uncertainty seeping into his voice. No need, Tommy replied, still wiping the blood from his lip. We called the family. Captain Wilson approached our table, kneeling beside Bill. Are you okay, Grandpa? Bill patted his hand. Okay, Leo. A little emotion to break the routine. He turned to assess Tommy's wound with professional detachment. Do you need medical attention, sir? I'm Tommy, and I haven't cut myself worth shaving. Meanwhile, Jake and 2 other soldiers had positioned themselves between the bikers and our table, not threatening, not advancing, just holding their ground, creating a buffer zone of disciplined muscle and combat experience. Knuckles looked around, realizing how quickly the situation had changed. His gang of 6 now faced at least 30 military personnel, with more arriving by the minute as messages and calls spread through the nearby base. "We don't want any trouble with the military," he muttered, his bravado deflating. "You should have thought of that before attacking veterans with decorations," Jake countered. "Tommy has 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star. Frank was on Gassan throughout the siege. Bill served 3 tours as a sniper. Jack was a medic who saved more lives than you've probably ever met in your life." "How would I know?" Captain Wilson interrupted. "That's the point. You saw some old guys and assumed they were sitting ducks. It never occurred to you they might be more than their age suggests." The biker with a wannabe on his vest, the youngest of the group, barely out of his 20s, tugged on Knuckles' arm. "Dude, let's go now. This isn't worth it." Knuckles shook him off, alcohol and pride still overriding common sense. "We didn't do anything illegal. The wah fell off. That's all." A new voice entered the conversation. The UPF post commander, a retired Marine colonel, had been watching from the bar's office. "In fact, I have clear video of you assaulting a customer," he said, picking up his phone. Normally, he'd just call the police, but since the family was taking care of it, he looked at Captain Wilson. "How would you like to proceed, Captain?" She considered for a moment. "I think education might be more valuable than prosecution." The colonel nodded, then addressed the motorcyclists. "This is what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to these gentlemen